Hi, this is Maury Moreland Morrison, here to tell you Geico has more than just great savings. Much more. Geico's been around for more than 75 years, back when they were using Morse code. Sorry, that's just my sense of humor. What's more, with Geico you get 24/7 access to licensed agents on the app, online, or over the phone, so you can talk to them at night or in the morning. So forevermore, just know that no other auto insurer has more than Geico. More power to you. Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings and welcome to Civil Alerts. This is your host, Asha. We're here on a Thursday night for the live edition of More Insight. I want to thank you all for tuning in and your feedbacks. Like always, on Tuesday, we discussed the Trayvon Martin situation, the travesty. We discussed the verdict, the unjust verdict with dealing with Zimmerman. And tonight, it's going to be a continuation, but more in terms of the historical roots that brings about such atrocious activity. And the name of this segment is Racism or Operating Agenda, with big question marks, calculating the Christian Black Codes, the Treaty of Verona, justified genocide, and the Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed with Master Teacher Taj Tarik Bey. This is very timely, and given the fact that many people think that this is just about racism and the skin hue game, and not really looking at the religion as well as like the politics and how the religious constructs really are in essence political systems, and that the colonial decisions to come upon different lands and to bring about conquest and genocide to the people, it has ancient origins. So you might as well say that this is a more insight and a hidden history segment combined, and then some. So be sure to have your pens and paper ready. I'm going to bring in some instrumental from Martin 45 King for a moment, and then we'll be back for this to bring you the discovery, I should say, or the uncovering. But all right, Civil Alert Rising. We'll be with you in a moment.
It's that Tyler boy.
right, and we are back, and it's time to dive into this hot subject matter. I do advise for everyone, if you're catching this on the archives, or even like 15 minutes after the show, be sure to go ahead and do a download. It will download in an MP3 format. So I know some said that the MP3U wasn't playing on their cell phones appropriately, but be sure to download it from your desktop, and then you'll probably be able to do a conversion so that you can hear it on your cell when you're on the go. And without any further delay, I'll be bringing on Taj anytime during the broadcast. If you have any questions, feel free to dial 858-357-8450. Again, that's 858-357-8450, and it's option 1. If you're in the chat room, right at 11:30, the live stream will go off. So if we go over by like 10 or 15 minutes or so, just be sure that you dial in direct on the line so that you can hear the rest of this discussion. Islam Taj.
Islam, Natasha. Islam family.
Well, welcome. How you doing?
Pretty good. Ready to get some work done.
Oh, yes. There's always so much work to get done, Taj. And as I see, the more that the involvement happens and the more that you start seeing things, it seems like there's more to get done and more responsibility.
Yes, it is, absolutely. Knowledge is both power and responsibility.
Oh, yes, it sure is. And, I also see here that Sabir is on the line. Sabir had came on Tuesday to talk about what was going on in L.A. and the recording. It did not come out clear because we did a pre-record to get some testimony, so I'm going to bring him on in a moment to go over that. And, with looking at the situation with Trayvon and with Zimmerman, I started thinking about the roots, as you always have, pretty much you discuss and you talk about. And I see where when you do bring up the issues in regards to the history and the colonialism and what has transpired, that is truthfully is for the reason for you to bring it and hone in and go into more detail about these items is because the people really need to get clear about the status of affairs and what really is going on.
Yes, because without a knowledge of history and law, the concepts of the people will almost always be wrong in their determinations and opinions on the corruptions, the misfortunes, the mistreatments, and the foul judgments that are made by those who are operating imposters in government that we have been, through ignorance and misdirection, referred to as racist or racism.
Yes. And that's back to that main question in regards to, is it racism or is this just an operating agenda? Business as usual.
Yes, and the business is really Inquisition operations by European Romans for the purpose of world conquest, essentially under what is traditionally called the Spanish Inquisition, which is the Inquisition against the Moors and Yahudi, or in most common language, the Moors and the Jews, which are fundamentally the same people. We're talking about the original Asiatics of the planet, distinguished from Europeans.
Yes. And, I know there's a lot that's going to be dropped, especially in regards to some of the philosophies that have been planted into the people's brains to pretty much get them into a docile state with not really understanding the metaphysics behind some of the scripture. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to bring Sabir on.
Islam,
Sabir. 347-982, you're live. Okay, maybe he's not there. Then again, that could be another caller because this board does have multiple different area codes on here. Okay. But, you know, and so in thinking about that, Taj, like when you heard, first heard about the verdict, what was your take? Because I'm pretty sure you had, you know, foresight because in dealing with, you know, the system and how everything is structured, you pretty much know what to anticipate. But what was your first thought, and what were some of the thoughts of the people around you, like in your classes and your travels?
Well, again, most, you know, very often people measure things that are under the operative democracy, U.S. Democracy Corporation. They keep measuring them by ethical and moral principles, and, of course, that's what's projected by the political systems operated by these Europeans doing business at North America. However, they are actually operating on documented agendas that have always caused injury to all the Asiatics of the Western Hemisphere and the world, etc., in persons of Asiatic African descent. And this is their political agenda under the Spanish Inquisition and under what is commonly known in history as the doctrine of discovery. Also their secret Treaty of Verona, inclusive of the strategies used by the priesthood for raping the people under the guise of loving Jesus. And JC, in all of their secret orders, really means Julius Caesar, whereas the common people who are taught by them think it means Jesus Christ. And of course, if they had a real knowledge in ecclesiastical studies, they would have found that out. However, most of their preacher leaders have an oath to Rome not to reveal those secrets, and most of them belong to secret societies, and they have a 501c3 agreement with Skull and Bones member Lyndon Baines Johnson for controlling their marching overseer Negro preachers. And so therefore the common people who pay their 10% tax to Rome, which is called tithe, are not aware of the reality of the real agenda behind the bishopric, who usually present themselves to the world as the clergy or the pope, or the bishopric or the church under those guises. And, of course, by the people not knowing the truth of history and religion, nor even knowing the true origin of the Bible and scriptures, etc., usually follow versions that are presented to them by the homosexual referred to as King James in reference to the colonization of North America. And, of course, the James River was named after him for the first European colonial aristocracy established in the Virginia area after they murdered Potentous Mataoka, who they refer to in history as Pocahontas, etc. But essentially, it must be understood that in order for our people to really have a grounded knowledge in what they refer to as the Bible, they must know of its origin from the Septuaginta and of the Septuaginta's origin from the Book of the Dead, and also that when you're dealing with the Torah, Pentateuch, and the Bible, etc., if the aspirants or the neophytes are not taught the truth behind the books of their Kabbalistic basis, their concepts will be absolutely, for the most part, incorrect when analyzing those books, which is indeed the greater problem with most of our people. So they don't know to look at the stories on two fronts, both as stories to also not only to examine moral character, but they're also Kabbalistic in the nature that they actually deal with the development of the body and the opening of the chakras, etc., in their original format. And that knowledge is maintained by the priesthood, but they don't teach it to their believers. and that way they actually live off of the ignorance of the masses and give them what is known by the priesthood dogma, which is actually counterfeit religion. And the priesthood maintains the truth of religion for their selfish selves, and the cosmological principles behind it, and of course the Kabbalistic nature of the books is not revealed to the masses, because they would be freed away from the priesthood itself and recognize that actually they're operating from the dark side.
Now, looking at that, and especially like with that time period reference where you were speaking of King James, the version, as well as like the first settlement of the Virginia as being the first colony.
Yes, that's
so
the first aristocracy after they murdered Mata Oka. Because remember, you'll hear in history where they teach the children, have Mata Oka walking around calling her Indian, and because they don't know that North America is not India, and that's a fiction created by the European colonists in order to muddy history and to divert the people's knowledge and their connection to the land. And so they'll have her in history books walking around in loincloths, etc. But Mata Oka was actually a potentess, actually. And the principle of, or the story of her marrying John Smith was a falsehood. She actually had matrimony to John Rolfe, and they were actually two Europeans competing for affection, because the principle of the culture in Asiatic African culture is actually matriarchy and not patriarchy, and pretty much the estates or the wealth was actually controlled through the woman. And so this is one of the reasons why so much emphasis was put on Mata Oka, who they rewrite in history as Pocahontas or Rebecca. And of course, after the John Rolfe so-called successfully convinced her in matrimony, they took her to Gravesend, England, and dumped her overboard, came back and established the aristocracy there. So that must be understood too. And so the general story about Mata Oka or Pocahontas is glorified without the real deal of the intrigue and the corruption of the plan of Roman operations in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, because I wanted to go in on that, because one thing that I've noticed to be a common sentiment when things happen that are destructive to our people, even if it's people that we when we know them or even if we don't know, many, and even if it happens to themselves, many will commonly say, oh, I'm going to forgive that person who did this. I don't have any hate in my heart. I love them, and they need to find God. And it kind of reminded me of what happened with the brother, the elder, that was singing at a concert in San Francisco the other day. And as he started to sing a song by Curtis Mayfield in regards to a change is going to come, an albino European girl jumped on the stage and pushed this man down to the ground. She was arrested and then let go, like within hours of that happening. And then right after that, Taj, they showed a brother sitting there talking, and he was like, oh, well, you know, she just needs to find God. She needs some love in her heart. I forgive her. And it made me think about the House of Burgesses, where they pretty much had codified and everything and laid down the statutes for Virginia back in, what was that, around 1620s or so. And I remember where it was saying that before, like, any Moors or Turks, and it used the word Indian in there as well, and then it said that before they were to be enslaved, they had to be baptized.
Yes. And one that the people must recognize is that all these terms, which are really not identities that are mixed, what you call terms, up with what you call bloodline identities in order to muddy the waters. And so when they're talking about Indians and Negroes, etc., they're still talking about Moors. This is why you see, like in the textbooks for European children, you will see if you start going into the research into the school records in the 1800s, you'll see that European children were schooled to the fact that they called us Indians, but they know we are not.
So that's so was that highlighted in that test that you all had published in regards? What was it? The elementary school test from like 1875 or 1895 or something?
Yes, that was not the only source, but we put that out as an example to show you, to show to the people, and particularly a lot of so-called black scholars would always try to convince our people they were Indians in order to get some kind of credibility when they know that that's as fraudulent as the Negro game is. And so what we did, we used that as an example to demonstrate proof that even their children know that this Indian game they played in North America is a fraud. And that while these people may accept it, that the European children are taught that it's not true. So that means while we, out of ignorance, may be thinking one way, thinking they're getting a benefit trying to be Indians, that the European are really looking at them with disdain.
And then that right there is very important to those that feel that they keep on referring to themselves as being black Indians and that they're upset.
And thinking that it gives them political credibility.
Right.
They jumped out of one pit into another. Matter of fact, they doubled it up with black Indian.
And so they're demanding to be federally recognized, where in essence they are the original peoples, and they've been duped to be thinking that they were just runaway slaves from Africa that blended in with the modern day image of what they say what Indians are. Yeah.
And all this pretty much reconstructed history and essentially a fraud because the people were already here. They did traffic people back and forth, both Asiatics and Europeans. However, for the most part, the bulk of the people here that think they Negro, black, colored, and Indian are all aboriginal to the land and been here for thousands of years, even before the land separated.
And that's a key point right there, because with looking at the reactions and activities, then people, if they're operating from the standpoint of this is not their land and they don't have any roots, they don't know their history, whatever, they pretty much will be looking at issues pretty much halfway, not really through a whole, they don't have the whole entire picture or the angle to
they're looking essentially with a mental disconnect, and also giving the foreign Europeans a credibility of ownership and sovereignty that does not belong to them, never did belong to them, and should not be exercised by them. And the people really need to recognize them for who they really are: foreign, alien, colonial operatives, and exploiters, and are acting and legislating accordingly.
And before we go into like the Christian Black Codes and the Treaty of Verona, I just wanted to touch base back on the whole philosophy in terms of turning the other cheek. Because when me and you were talking, you had said something that I was like, whoa, I never had heard anyone like break down the metaphysics behind that and what that is essentially talking about, because it seems as if like the reason why our people aren't very like shrewd and having like a zero tolerance policy for any type of injustice is because of that turning the other cheek. So in doing that, the little injustices that happen, they keep on piling and piling on top of each other and turn into massive things, as we see in the situation.
Yes, That's a mental socialization strategy set up by the bishopric in their, what they call their transliterations of the Septuaginta into the Bible. And this is is very important for the people to know that the Bible, the Pentateuch, Hexateuch, etc., the Torah, etc., are all Kabbalistic books. And of course, as you already know, the masses are not told the truth about the Kabbalistic origin of the Bible as they have it today. And so when they look at it, read the Bible, they can look at it as from a point of stories with personalities, but they do not know how to pull the veil and look at it from its cosmological and Kabbalistic Gnostic perspective that it is originating from. However, all persons in the bishopric, the clergy of the church, and all rabbinates, and all persons in position of the high degrees of ministry are all aware when they get their degrees and when they are required to get their PhDs in the study of world religion, know that those books are Kabbalistic in their origin, inclusive of the fact that they must study the Hebrew alphabet, or what the common people here as called the Hebrew alphabet, in order to properly disseminate those books and recognize their cosmological, metaphysical basis of the development of the body, as well as the activation of the major chakras of the body and the philosophies that go with it. And when you hear the term turn the other cheek, it is actually, from a Kabbalistic perspective, making reference to the activation of the pineal gland, or what is called the seat of David, the throne, etc., which is actually what you would call spiritual organic. Those are organic glands, which when you're dealing with the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, etc., and much emphasis is put on the pineal gland. Now, under the circumstances when beings are concentrated or concentrating their carnal life within the lower self, and so therefore people must know the Kabbalistic knowledge or gnosis about the higher self and the lower self, which is represented by Hex Alpha 2 on one level, and that is the trine up and the trine down put together in balance, which some of the masses refer to as the Hebrew star or the Star of David. That has multiple meanings, but on one level deals with what is represented of the spiritual and the carnal world. Also on another level, it deals with the upper world and the lower world. On the level of what you call moral, ethical government, or what is referred to as spiritual philosophies, this is beyond or in connection with the breathing techniques or breath, which is spirit, which is taught for one to be more accentuated, or how do you say, your vibration is higher for you to receive knowledge. And so religion, spirituality is usually assumed to be one and the same, when actually spirituality is the art of breath, and religion is the philosophies that go with it, which is a learning system of philosophies. But at any rate, when someone is dealing in their lower self, or when they're concentrated in the carnal desires and are dealing with what is called the negative, people will also refer to the negative as the devil, or that's the lower self. And when they focus an injury or intend an injury to you, or something like that, or wishing an injury to you, turning the other cheek is representative of you flipping or activating your pineal gland, sort of like a mirror in your forehead, and giving them back their gift. And therefore you don't have the karmic debt of wishing evil, but you just simply give the evil back to them, or the seed of it that they wished on you. And that is transliterated for the common people as turning the other cheek. And so their perception of it is incorrect. And so they think that they're supposed to let people beat them up and just forgive them. And that was designed by the popes of Rome. That's why they won't tell the people the Kabbalistic background and the metaphysical knowledge Kabbalistic of what these real meanings are. And so if the people don't know the Kabbalistic background of these books, they only take it from the perspective given in their transliterations that was made by the bishopric of Rome, which are actually designed to make the people passive while they get raped and killed. So they don't fight back against the popes of Rome and the bishopric who are raping the women, stealing people's land, hanging people, lynching people, quartering people, et cetera, and then stealing all their resources, which is what we're all experiencing all around the world today by the popes and the bishopric who appear to be innocent and appear to be God-loving and all that stuff. And so the people think, for the masses, think that the word God only means the supreme being, when the bishopric knows that it means government ordinance departments. And it's actually what you would call civil government. But for the masses, they submit to the popes or the government of the Rome because they think that the Romans are talking about the supreme being, when actually amongst all of the priesthood and amongst government officials, God means government ordinance department. It's an acronym, and it's a verb transitive coming from the Old High German Gott or Gut. And, of course, that's derived from the Sanskrit, actually the swastika, which is the oldest religious symbol on the planet with the 4 gates, and that means the good being, and that's where the term the supreme being comes from. Now, the European German transliteration of that Kodam and Huda, etc., converts to Gott and Gut, and that converts to the Middle English as God, and they remove essentially one O, because it is derived from simply meaning good. And so they remove one O, and they give it to the masses as the name of the supreme being, when actually it is the symbol of the supreme law of the universe, which is Swastika. And so the masses think it's a noun, but the priesthood knows it's a verb transitive. And it means to call upon, to invoke, and to pour out, which any scholar will find in any quality dictionary in the appendix when they trace it to its etymological origin. And so it is misrepresented to the masses for control purposes. And this is why when the term is used loosely, the word God may apply to anything or anybody, whether positive or negative. So it's important for the masses to know that its general misrepresentation is for control purposes, and that they would be well fitted to study so that they do not get caught into the mystery system of the dogma. And it does not mean that because they're dealing with the truth that they're immoral or that they're not ethical, because it doesn't go together.
I see what you're saying with that. And, you know, and what you said about the turning the other cheek, it reminds me of what we used to say as children, where one would say, roses are red, violets are blue, whatever you say mean to me bounces off of me and sticks back to you. Remember, that is a child's version or child's conception of actually the Kabbalistic principle of what that really means. That's something.
That's the activation of the pineal gland. That means reflecting the mirror right from your forehead. Meaning it's done in the abstract. Meaning when some wish you well, you know, you don't absorb it. You just give it back to them. It's sort of like if somebody gives you a poison glass of water, you say, "Oh, thank you very much," and give it back to them. Go ahead, you drink. Therefore, you're not guilty, are you? Because you didn't wish the evil. You see the whole point? The issue of avoiding the karmic debt.
I see what you're saying. You know, now that we're speaking on this, I really have to start observing a lot of the child riddles and those little songs that would come, because as I got older, I said, whoa, I wonder what was going on for all of that to come down like that. But I know, you know, that we are the ancestors, like, resurrected. But then I'm thinking, like, now that you're breaking this down about the Kabbalistic principles, that maybe it's a situation where, like you said, the principles are in the air and they just get converted into, like, these songs that we think that the children are just making up and singing. That is something, Taj. That's a whole other angle.
This is why, and this is why the preachers in the church will never tell their congregants about the Septuaginta, because once the people know about the Septuaginta, then they'll start tracing back and start seeing that they've been played. But then a lot know, but a lot won't say, because a lot of them are willing slaves. Because a lot of them really do, in their heart, really consciously worship Constantine, knowing that they use the word Jesus as a front, and that it's really a password. It's not negative. The word's not negative, but it's not the name of the prophet. His name is Yahshua.
That is something else. That is something.
And all the secret societies know that Jesus is a password.
Explain that.
Every preacher. Every preacher knows that. But none of the congregation are ever told that they pay the bills.
So you say Jesus is a password.
Yes, it's the password. It means justice. And when you do the studies and you go into the Kabbalistic history of the Bible and the Septuaginta, you find is Yahushua. And Jesus is not a translation of Yahushua either.
So in essence, we're looking at that. Jesus
means that the masses to put it bluntly, the masses are deliberately deceived by the priesthood, deliberately.
Right, and so that's pretty much brought forth so that they won't really start looking hardcore at the whole consciousness element of instituting right when something wrong is done in regards to the whole concept of justice.
Yes, and just like that, and so people don't know that the same principle of the higher self and the lower self is translated into government and essentially is represented in the government structure as a republic versus the democracy. So the democracy is actually the order of the priests. Yes, it is.
So I see. So this whole thing with overthrowing and taking away the liberties of the people, this is an old action that's been happening.
That's why persons in positions of power always belong to secret societies, because they have to learn the truth of how things are really run. And so, because democracy means, quote-unquote, priest rule. That's what it means. And the republic, which is established in the Constitution, means common rights, and it's a common rights form of government, logically, so it deals with the common law or the ancient principles of the people. And so it deals with a self-governing forum wherein a free, sovereign, and moral and enlightened people are guaranteed to one another and to all the minorities in society's rights and obligations to retain, to protect each other's divine given rights, common law rights, etc., relative to freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whereas the democracy code is actually a form of priest rule, which is designed to cause the government to collapse so they can institute the tyranny and the demagogism, or what is known as dictatorship. I mean, the democracy system is actually a temporary setup because it never lasts. It causes the economies and the economics of the people to collapse, and most of them don't last over 200 years. But if people don't know history and they don't know government and they don't study civics, they wouldn't be aware of it. That's why people support it ignorantly, not knowing that it's set up by the priesthood they think is separate. So when you look at the politicians and you look at the priesthood, those who really know government know their partners and they're one and the same. But the ignorant think one is of God and the other is of not, when really they both are government ordinance departments. You see the whole point?
I see.
That's why the masses have always suffered. And this is why when they use the philosophies taught by the priesthood, they can never solve problems. And so in order to pacify the people, they mentally opiate them and tell them, keep hope alive one of these days, keep hope alive, keep on, promise from God, and it's always like that. But the preachers and the politicians are always living quite well at the expense of the poor.
So how
thinking they have religion and they have dogma. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking. So how does the Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed fit in with
it's called the Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed, and that's the official name of Constantine's religion, and its common name to the masses is Christianity. And they think JC means Jesus Christ. It means Julius Caesar.
So exactly what was the nature of this? How did this creed come about?
Well, Constantine and his mother, actually they called the Great Council, and one of the major initiations or motivations for the construction of the Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed was the suppression of what you would call the science or the Kabbalistic knowledge from which the Bible and the Scriptures originally come, i.e. The zodiac, and therefore the true knowledge of the books being cosmological and Kabbalistic in nature, dealing with the processions of the sun, etc., and the stars, etc., the suppression of that knowledge, but yet the preservation of it for the elite was one of the major motivations of the Nicene Creed. This is why, centrally, when you deal with 325 A.D., after they so-called killed Yahshua, or what they reconvert in the literature as assassination of Jesus, they'll call it A.D., they had a council 325 years after that and made up this creed. And so the general function or the keynote issues that were to be addressed at the Nicene Creed was the Arian heresy, and that deals with the sign of Aries, or what you call the East Gate of the Holy Cross or the mundane cross, and that is what you would call the 21st day of March, which is actually the vernal equinox, and the keeping of Easter, which is really the common name which is given to the vernal equinox for the masses who don't know its cosmological origin, and they will call Easter, and they would also refer to it as Ishtar, etc., and they'll also refer to it as the Passover. But all of them are actually reference to the vernal equinox, which is really the season of spring, based on the movements of the planets and the knowledge, the mathematical knowledge and the effects of the planets. And so they refer to Aries, the ram, being in the east, and therefore they refer to it as the Arian heresy. And so when you see the establishment of the Niceno Creed is dealing with the Arian heresy and the keeping of Easter. Because anyone that did not worship the popes of Rome, they refer to as heretics. And therefore, that was the fundamental purpose, although there were other reasons. Those were the two major purposes of the constructing and the adopting of what is known as the Nicene Creed, or the Niceno Constantinopolitan Creed, which is commonly called today Christianity, which was set forth by the bishoprics of Rome, the popes of Rome, 325 years after the assassination of the Yahshua, and then they projected to the world that Yahshua, was the founder of Christianity, and they transliterated the name to Jesus, so the people would hide behind the name of Jesus while really worshiping Constantine, and that's the Nicene Creed. And of course, that can be found in any quality dictionary, and of course, in anybody that does any what you call ecclesiastical religious research will find that very easily, because even though they hide it, it's not so hidden that it cannot be found. And therefore, again, on another hand, it's inexcusable for our people to continue to follow worshiping Constantine, hiding behind the name of Jesus and wondering why our people are poor and why they're suffering in all their communities, and also why they have spy centers that they call churches at least 4 or 5 blocks in any direction in every 4th city. And they are funding their own enslavement and don't even know it. With the help of their marching, praying Negro overseer, minion work for the corporate state Negro preachers who are paid off with their 501c3 agreement, tax-exempt agreement with the popes of Rome, pretending it comes from Jesus and God.
Wow, this is something. So, with
that's
that
what
in
goes
mind,
on in our community. That's what goes in our community, and they think it's enlightenment when it's actually dead culture. But they won't render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and wonder why the suffering continues.
with that rendering onto Caesar's what is Caesar's,
that means
some will interpret that.
Yes, back. That's what it means. That means giving back Christianity to the Europeans and going back to the principles of their own mothers and fathers, which they have rejected and therefore are suffering.
But what you said about that, the zodiac, too, it's kind of reminded me of some of the writings of King James prior to the coming out of the King James version of the Bible, or the translation.
Yes, you'll find the zodiac in all of the books.
Yeah,
and they'll
there's a lot of
disguise them under the tribes. They'll disguise them under the tribes. You'll find them in the Quran. You'll find them in the Bible and Torah, etc. But they'll disguise them.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I said it's in all the books, but yet is never taught to the people by the priesthood.
Yeah, because I noticed that in those early writings, it's a heavy, heavy writings that he has on a lot of the Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm. And you know, and the whole deal of the Greek mythology is exactly that, because Greek is a myth. Mm-hmm. That's Egypt, or what the people call Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
That's why whenever any scholar really studies so-called Greek history, they'll go right into what is known as Egyptian history.
Right.
Because all it is that they cribbed it and claiming credit for civilization that did not originate with them.
Mm.
But it's part of the world conquest. It's part of their plan for, world conquest and genocide.
Mm-mm-mm. The operating agenda, which will bring us to the Treaty of Verona.
Mm-hmm.
And after we discuss the Treaty of Verona, I would like to bring Sabir, if he's still on. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let me just double check here. Give me 1 second, Taj. Sabir?
Yeah, I'm here.
It's on, Sabir.
Peace. What's going on, T?
All right, good brother.
None. What's going on? What's happening?
Welcome, Sabir. How you doing?
Nothing. Just actually back and forth on different phone calls and listening to Taj at the same time.
Yeah, I could tell that you were busy. When we did that pre-record on on Tuesday, it was a little low. So I just wanted you to come on just to give an overview about what you experienced and what is happening. And I know that you did a lecture in regards to the slave codes, and we're going to go into that. And I wanted you to chime in alongside that, and we're going to discuss the Treaty of Verona as well.
Wow, it's a whole lot, man. I've been on so many different radio shows and interviews since this thing happened, man. I'm wore out. I'm ready to just go in the Matrix for a minute. It's a lot of stuff that was going on out here. Actually, I was was you trying to reach me not too long ago? You tried to call me?
Oh no, when we first started, I brought you on, but I think you had the line on mute or something.
No, yeah, no. I was on the phone. I don't know if y'all familiar with this guy named Larry Elder. I don't know if you're familiar. Everybody knows who this guy is. Larry Elder is a radio personality out here, and he said something recently, I think, on Facebook, and they saying that he don't like, black people. Just leave it, keep it plain for everybody that's listening. He don't like black people. He's against black people. So he's against a lot of things that is going on. So I just got a phone call last night about sitting on his radio show with him. So the guy told him to go ahead and get anybody you want. So that's what the phone call was earlier. So he's some type of big radio personality out here in L.A., and that's going to be funny. That's going to be interesting when I get on that show because, I'm going to bring up Taj, the whole nationality piece. I'm going in. So it's going to be good, and that's something that's going to be, like I said, it's going to reach a lot of people that's really unfamiliar with this information. I heard bits and pieces because that's a total different audience. Go back to what are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Okay. So go back to what I was saying earlier when we were talking. What was that? What day was that? Tuesday?
Yeah.
Was that Tuesday? No, I was just saying when everything kicked off out here, how the media, and that's why I always tell people we need to get control of the media, because the way they portray this stuff out here, like the police had everything under control. Let me know if you can still hear me because I'm actually sitting outside. I walked outside of a restaurant. They were trying to make it seem like the media out here had everything under control, in which they really didn't, because what they said is that if you didn't have a press pass from the city, they had to go beyond the yellow line. Of course, there's always Europeans that's stepping up and saying, no, I'm standing my ground, and we are the press. We don't need a press sticker. And what I shared with them, and it should be on one of their cameras, I don't know if they replayed it, but I was saying that you don't need a press sticker to report what is going on. It's the people's right to know. And if what happened, what they were trying to do is get their own people, to film, to make it sound like we had everything under control. This is really what went down, just the looting, and it wasn't true. I was on the ground for 3 days out here. And also on Sunday, my man might be on the phone too, Ariel. We was asking Sergeant on Sunday about the law, and we were just talking about what if a cop violated his oath? He beat around the bush for like a good 20 minutes before he really told us. And that's basically he was asking questions, man. And it was just lies after lies and why he was down there. And he wasn't down there for protecting the people. He said he was down there for gang members. If anybody's familiar with Leimert Park out here in California, you don't see cops around Leimert Park. It's basically a drum circle that's out here. It's not, no gang members hanging around there, okay? But he said he was a gang member from the gang member unit, but he was sitting there, and I told him when I walked up to his car, he's sitting there to initiate or intimidate those people, and he said, well, I'm not there for that. I said, yes, you are. So he gets out the car like he was going to run or something, and we just went on the other side of him, and we started asking him some questions, but, we sat there, it might be on YouTube somewhere, we sat there for like an hour. It's a long, drawn out what we talked about, but we brought up a lot of things, and we basically just slamming him about the law, So, hold on. Could you hold on 1 second, please? Sorry, hold on 1 second.
Yeah, but Taj, it's interesting in regards to what he was saying about them demanding that he should have like a press pass or something in a public space in a rally. And I know you always address, the whole concept of looking at the subtleties of situations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's back to what Raleigh said to the Moors in the early 20s. He said to the Moors, our own press is the most powerful weapon in the hand of our group today. And without a press of our own, we'll never be able to shuffle ourselves out from under the lies that are heaped upon us every day. And so and it's back to the principle of with the secret Treaty of Verona. And this is one of the reasons why they make those types of restrictions artificially under color law to stop anybody else reporting anything of what's really going on so they can shape the concepts of the people.
So with dealing with this, the secret treaty, how exactly did this come about? And who instituted this treaty? Well,
you have to put it in context with the history, So when you look inquisition operations of Roman conquest for the world, you look at the date and with the secret treaty, of course, that's 1213. You see? And so when you look at 1213, you'll see that's during the time when also when they were initiating the Inquisition operations. You know, so it's not like there's a correlation, if you understand. Now, keep in mind, too, for people who think that the politicians and these people aren't operating on this agenda, you know, all they need to do is go to the congressional records and recognize that the secret Treaty of Verona was read into the record in 1916. And keep in mind, when you talk in 1916, you're talking about the area of time when they were setting up the Federal Reserve. You see the whole point? Between 1913 and 1916 correlations. So in April the 25th, 1916, they entered the secret Treaty of Verona into the records under American diplomatic codes, and that was like from 1778 to 1884, and that's in Volume 2, Elliott, page 179. And keep in mind, 1884 is when they had the secret, when they had their Berlin conference in Berlin, Germany, dealing with the divisions of the Moorish Empire under the guise of the Ottoman Empire, etc., between Christian nations. And so you can see all of this stuff is actually tied together. And then, of course, with the secret Treaty of Verona, this is one of the reasons why you see them setting up the democracy system to overthrow the republic that's established in the Constitution, and that would be expressed in Article 1 of the secret Treaty of Verona. And, of course, this is the congressional records of the United States, and so all politicians and all these so-called marching Negro leader guys have this information, and when they pretend they don't know anything about this stuff, you already know it's because of the Europeans, because of their agenda, and the so-called Negro preachers because of their compromission. Article 1, the high contracting powers being convinced that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maxim of the sovereignty of the people with the high divine right engage mutually in the most solemn manner to use all their efforts to put an end to the system of representative governments in whatever country it may exist in Europe, and to prevent its being introduced into those countries where it is not yet known. Now, so as you can see, that is an absolute contradistinction to Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution that guarantees a republican form of government for every state in the Union. You see the whole point? Now you understand the origin of their desire for a democracy system. In Article 2, it says, as it cannot be doubted that the liberty of the press is the most powerful means used by the pretended supporters of the rights of nations to the detriment of those princes, the high contracting parties promise reciprocally to adopt all proper measures to suppress it, not only in their own states, but also in the rest of Europe. And so as you can see, that practice is actually what Sabir was identifying. And this is why it's important for people to know the real history and law to understand these things that they've been calling prejudice and racism really has another agenda. And these people are operating from a written agenda that's hundreds of years old, and our people think it's a mere attitude. You see the problem? Now let's look at Article 3. And this is where the clergy that our people trust, and they got these buildings every 4 blocks in any of these poor cities, they got a church, don't they?
Yes.
All right, in any direction. And you walk down off the beautiful steps of any of those buildings that these poor people are funding, and all you see is destruction and poverty, don't you?
Yeah.
But the people are told that they're saved, and they're supposed to tell their children that, aren't they?
Yep.
So let's read Article 3 of the secret Treaty of Verona so we can expose their clergy that they think love Jesus. Here's Article 3 of their secret Treaty of Verona, and it's actually the oath of the clergy to the popes of Rome. Article 3, convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep the nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contracting parties declare to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interests, so intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. So these people think they're delivering and submitting them to Jesus, and they're really submitting them to the Popes of Rome. That's their clergy. And this is another reason why this is called a secret treaty, because you can see how socially and economically dangerous that would be in the public information base. You see the point? Because they think these preachers love Jesus. They're delivering them to the Popes of Rome.
So this right here, being that this was read into the, you said into Congress in 1916?
Into congressional records in 1916. And as you can see, from that point, almost everything that's been going on in government has been a counteraction to what Noble Drew set up for the redemption of these people and for the uplifting of fallen humanity. These have been countermeasures, you see.
Yeah, and I see, too, the parallel with the shift where some of the churches used to be very active as far as, like, standing up for injustice, and then people will notice now that they will, like, say,
that's
like,
why when they have a problem, they send their overseers, Negro preachers right in the middle of it.
Yeah, because even with the day-to-day things, like dealing with, like, with a lot of the drug dealers, all of the liquor stores that might be everywhere, even, you know, with dealing with the media, you don't see a large congregation of the preachers or even rabbis, as well as a lot of the imams that were in sheiks, even some of the grand sheiks that would be standing up as a collective to speak out about this on an ongoing basis in regards to the, you know, the profane things that exist in the society.
If you notice, they don't teach the people anything about civics or international law.
No.
Or what's really going on. And none of them will expose the people to the secret Treaty of Verona because it will be obvious that they're in it. It's not accidental that all of them are doing well while their congregations and believers are relatively poor.
And then this explains, too, Taj, while in some cases, even when it comes to exercising, you know, and people exercise their rights that are protected by the Constitution, that in certain cases there may even be sheiks with certain temples that will say, like, oh, you know, no, those aren't really Moors, and we don't have anything to do with them, and things of that nature.
Yes, because they're against anybody who enforces the Constitution, which secures the rights of the people, see, because that's a republic. And all of those who are really working for the Popes of Rome have their oath with Article 3 of the Secret Treaty of Verona. So you can see why some of them say that Drew didn't teach civics. You see the origin? See, but if you didn't know law and history, people would think they just have a mere difference of opinion. When actually they're pro operatives. See, you know, and this is why it's important for them to keep the public ignorant, because an informed public is hard to enslave. But once you're informed, you can see through them.
Yeah, like how, because I thought that it was very timely at how that movie, what is it called? Fruitvale or Velfruit or something, Fruitvale Station, where they're pretty much talking about a situation where a young boy had got gunned down by the police in Oakland, and it just caused this uproar. And I think that launched like about right around the time, right like a day before the verdict that had hit on that Saturday. And so it's like they just put all these things like with the media, and then the situation happening with the brother in San Francisco, the lady pumping, you know, jumping up, throwing him down, and he's pretty much pumping that turn the other cheek, knowing now that we're talking to you that's not even the true meaning of what turn the other cheek is. But all of this stuff, it's like you see the patterns. It's like a PR campaign. A PR campaign to reinforce all of the stuff that we're talking about right now.
Yep. That's why they say, just like in their first line, right? Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep the nations in a state of passive obedience. And if people think they deliver them to God, they deliver them to the government ordinance departments of the popes of Rome. Keep them passive while they get raped and murdered and killed. And this is why you see even a lot of those policemen have such arrogant attitudes when they're mistreating the people, because they know they're backed up by the system. Because the system is represented by Knights Templars, Popes of Rome, etc., that sends them out there to what? To rob the people, making the people think they're public servants and they really work for the corporations. This is why the police departments pretend to have the powers that's bestowed only on the sheriff, and exercise authority that don't belong to them, and actually use it to rob and murder people.
So let's talk about that for a second. Or I'm sorry, or would you prefer to finish with the other 4 articles?
What of the secret treaty of Verona?
Yeah, because I wanted, when you said that, I would like for you to go in a bit about the whole concept of the power is supposed to be invested within the sheriff and not the police.
Well, see, sheriff comes from actually Sharif, you see? You know, because they've taken over Morocco. But the sheriff is an elected official that is constitutional by the principle of the Republican form of government based in the common law for the people, for the preserving of the rights of the people. The policeman is actually a private security guards hired by municipalities, which are corporate entities which are designed in their general operation to denationalize the people and actually put them in corporate slavery. This is why they created the corps after they closed the Freedmen's Bureau in 1868 and created the corps, the Article of the Corps, and that's the Amendment 14th Amendment, which was never properly ratified, so they could bureaucratize slavery. And with that corpse or that dead principle, they created the corporation. And so the corporation is derived from the word corpse, which means actually dead. And so they've given the corpse the appearance of personhood, when in fact it's a construct written on paper. And they use that to house and to disguise all their bureaucratic slavery. And that's pretty much what they have our people in. And as you understand, when they closed the Freedmen's Bureau, they listed all persons who they branded Negroes, blacks, and colored under the 14th Amendment as Christian property. And this is, again, why you see traditionally even these people who run around marching and praying called Negro, black, and colored can't even vote with those names that belong to European colonial Romans unless every third president or so signs a bill for them to vote using them names that aren't their own, because they're listed as real estate, just like any other piece of property, descendable to the European families under the Emancipation Code, transferred from servitude to the Congress, etc., and therefore state property and listed as stateless persons. This is, again, why it's important for us to teach our people law and teach them history and put it back together so they can use their intelligence and reasoning mind to change their conditions by virtue of correcting their status before the civilized world, honoring their mothers and fathers like other civilized people, and rendering back unto Caesar what is Caesar's, giving back their names and their religion, and go back to the principles of their ancient mothers and fathers, that their land might be healed.
Yes, that is something. We do have a caller that's been holding for a while. I just want to open up the lines before we move forward. Caller 314-828. Thank you so much for your attention. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from. Any question or comment? Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from. Hello.
Islam.
Islam. How you doing?
I'm good. How everybody doing today?
How you doing?
Oh, very well. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Finally got to talk to the brother Taj.
Islam, good brother.
Good, Islam. Appreciate you and everybody else that's assisting in uplifting the fallen humanity. Really appreciate it because you're touching people all over the planet. It really touched me and the people who I've been around just spreading like wildfire. So we're getting it together.
Right on, good brother. Keep up the good work, too.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I got a couple questions concerning I got a couple questions. The first one is concerning the bonds. Now, I've been doing some research on how to obtain the information on obtaining the bonds for judges and public servants that have violated the natural person. And is the Department of Labor one of the ways of obtaining the information for the public servants, particularly the judges?
Go ahead. I mean, did you say, did you have that information or you wanted to share it or what?
Well, I was researching it and I was just wanted to know was I were on the right path about the Department of Labor being a way to obtain the information to obtain the bond.
Well, that's one of the ways because the Department of Labor, because remember that through the Popes of Rome, they have hypothecated all of the people's labor and that these are really auctioneers and they are delivering the people to the Popes of Rome. So in the different jurisdictions, they will hide them in different, like from a perspective of law, you already know that their bonds and their oaths should be posted wherever they're doing business. But they make sure that they're not there because they don't want the people to be aware of them and that the bond and the oath goes together. And by law, it should be filed with the Secretary of State, ETC, but you already know that they've transferred their offices to the IMF, and they're hiding it in the Department of Labor and sometimes in other departments to keep it away from the people. But, yes, you're on the right path.
Appreciate that. Another question about as far as dealing with the mandamus, filing the mandamus.
A writ of mandamus, that means the transfer of a case to a higher court, or either proper jurisdiction.
So once a mandamus is filed with the district court and they dismiss the case being frivolous and it's an actual violation of a human right, is it proper to go to the lawsuit?
Always, because what you have is that these people in inferior courts or in courts of improper jurisdiction, whenever they claim a jurisdiction where they have no authority, that commission or that act itself constitutes a crime, and therefore it's a trespass, and therefore you have right to be restored, don't you?
Exactly. Well, basically, I'm just making sure that I'm on the right path, because I know the have has not been told, or in order to get the information, you have to do research. And I've been researching.
And we all need to start getting on that same path, don't we? And start costing them for running their secret Treaty of Verona, pretending to be government when they're actually imposters.
Exactly. That's the only way to get your rights, you have to enforce your rights, because ain't nobody going to give you rights. So the rights are there. So the rights are there, but the people don't know the rights. So the whole thing is learning them. It's no different than you having a car to fix. You want to drive, your car break down, then if you don't know how to fix it, somebody had to come fix it for you. But if you know how to fix it, then you can handle it yourself. So by us not knowing the law, we have to pay the lawyer. So ignorance is no excuse of law. So anything you're ignorant of, you have to pay. And
that's right. Not only that, most of the barristers of England, under their oath to the Popes of Rome, are really part of the problem.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons why they control the courts and try to make sure that the people can't enter a complaint into the court without coming through them, while the courts are actually being supported by the public the Barristers Association claims to be the owners. That's why you see these judges who are usually lawyers themselves claiming, telling the people that this is my court, because it's not the people's court. That's what they're talking about. Exactly. Therefore, any man or woman that can't present themselves in proper person will almost undoubtedly be represented by some foreigner claiming a right of leave over their person and their estate. Thus, the Barristers Association that bars them from every right of the state and every right of inheritance, including their liberties, and then makes them pay, pretending to be advocates for the people when they're actually advocates for the Pope of Rome via the secret Treaty of Verona, for the suppression of the people and the overthrow of the Republic. And that's the actuality of their operations. And you can even check some of that out in the congressional record when the investigation into the Barristers Association took place, ETC. And one day we'll do a little bit of information on that and expose that information to the people too. Therefore, when you get a lawyer thinking that you won't get ready to get justice, you're getting ready to get just beat.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, brother, did you have any other questions before we move forward?
If it ain't no problem, I have one more. If there's no one else holding, I don't want to hold it. I don't want to hog the spot.
Oh, you can go on and ask the question. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I know the half has not been told, and I've been doing a lot of research on astrology. And when I came across astrology, I came across two systems of astrology. You have the Western tropical system, then you got the Hindu or / sidereal astrology. So I haven't seen Sidereal.
Yeah.
So I seen on the website, I've seen sidereal time, but I haven't seen nothing that in the sidereal astrology. So I just wanted to touch on that because I've been really interested.
What you're really talking about is actual measurement of time. So we measure time by what you would call we create what you would call political calendars. That may be district or what may be territorial, that be used in different districts or different nation states, and some in the same nation states that are based roughly on the precession of the sun and the revolving of the sun, of the earth and the moon chasing the sun, etc. And so you will be divisions into certain days, etc. So when you're dealing with sidereal, you're dealing with an actual calculation of the movement or the precession of the sun in relationship to the planets. So you're dealing with the actual mathematical geographical positions and energy outputs of the planets. Therefore, you're dealing with what you would call the true chronology.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and we really appreciate the information. And study. It ain't enough studying. We've been left out. And I forgot to state my name. I'm from St. Louis territory, and my name is Racism Bey. And pack it to more.
Greetings and love to the family.
Thank you.
All right. Peace and love, brother. Have a good night.
You do the same.
Mm-hmm. Caller 313, you're live on Civil Alert. Please state your name and when you're calling from, your question or comment.
Peace, this is Sonia calling from Detroit.
Peace, how you doing, Sonia?
I'm good. I just had an aha moment when we were talking about the bonds. I used to be an accountant, and I started doing construction accounting. And for the main company, which had subcontractors, and we had to do, the subs had to submit to the main to get paid every week, and I had to make sure everybody had to show their insurance certificates and their sworn statements, their lien waivers every week. You know, not just one time, every week. But it just tied into the, this is like the micro of the macro of what you were just saying. And I was like, oh, because I kept hearing it over and over about the bonds. And I'm like, what are they talking about? But it just clicked to me that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, it just clicked like that. Okay. I thought that was just specific to this business area.
Yes.
But listening to you guys.
Now, consider this as your knowledge as an accountant. For anyone or any corporate entity to do business on the land in any nation state, they must have a charter coupled with a bond, you see, to even do business.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's essentially, on another level, in government, license and insurance, isn't it? Exactly what they ask you if you're traveling on the street. You see the point? And so they demand from people a license and insurance while they don't produce their own. And most of them are operating unlawfully against the interests of the people. You see the point?
Yes. Oh, you just tied in something else. Yes. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Wow. Now, that's something. That was the first time that I heard about looking into the Department of Labor for the bonds.
That's the reason why when they start asking you for your license and insurance, you ask them for theirs. You see the point?
And they carry on as just like they're not obligated with being.
Yeah, they act like they don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So they put a bond on you. When they're violating you, you should be going after their bond. You see the point why we tell people that?
Yes.
They're public servants. If they're public servants, they're putting the people in servitude and raping the people. When that's why they have a bond for people to sue them when they violate them. That's why they always hide it. The fact that they're hiding it indicates to you that they're conscious that they're committing corruption and organized crime and racketeering and human trafficking.
So on that note, Taj, what's your take in regards to the suits? Because I know what you said about every time something happens that we should be costing them. There is an era where people may say, like, no, go ahead.
That's why I say go after their bonds, and therefore you should build a database with all the operatives in the territories where you're dealing with, so that when you interface with them, the first thing you should be looking for them, concerning them, is their charter and their bond. Everybody, from the clerks, onto the policemen, onto the tow truck drivers, and to everybody else that messes with you, steals your cars and everything else like that, that's what you should be going after. And build a database and share it with everybody to make sure it's posted. Because they're supposed to be posted for public record, but they don't show it because they're operating under a democracy system. They're there to rob the people. Therefore, the people are going to have to do their diligent duty and share with others who are active and make sure that information is on everybody's database.
Yeah. I hear you on that. Because what happens is that when these things do happen, it's like you have to be running around in circles trying to find and get the information.
It's exactly right, which lets you know that they are consciously doing racketeering. That's why they hide it. When it's supposed to be posted wherever they're working. If they stop somebody on the street, do they let people get away with talking about their license and insurance is at their cousin's house on the dresser?
Nope.
Well, how do these public servants go around with guns and stuff, accosting the people, abusing the people, and then they don't have their charter and their bond available for the people, which should be posted wherever they're working, including the courts. If there's a court, the charter and the bond should be posted at that court door, including the Constitution that they're bound to uphold. But you'll see none of it with you.
No.
Because they're organized criminals. And that's what our problem is, that our people have been calling racism. You see the point? They're carrying out the secret Treaty of Verona, and our people are dealing with emotions and deliberately misled by their marching Negro leaders who are overseers for the most part. That's not every one of them, but for the most part, that's who they are. That's why they won't teach people civics. While They'll sit around and tell the people that they're the direct descendants of the founders of civilization, and then don't teach them civics, which is a science of government that is based in the principle of organized government and civilization. Contradiction, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
That we talk about nationhood this and nationhood that, and won't teach people nationality, and international law. See the contradictions?
Mhm. And that's what we touched upon the rest of the articles in this treaty. I think it would be good to go into the principles of nationality and just carry on from what we left off in our last show, and talk about the importance of that and how this ties in with everything that we discussed.
See, then people have to understand the fundamental principle of status and a state, and that status and a state are in law synonyms. And one of the major functions of the closing of the Freedmen's Bureau by the European operators in North America in 1868, and the creation of the corps, or the corporate entity, and muddying the water with the common people as to the word person. And so the average person, people who are taught or mistaught by those who are controlled under the Roman institutions, think that people means themselves when people, or person means themselves when person actually means the corpse or dead or corporation. And so the corporation being created artificially by legislation under the 14th Amendment, ETC, gave them what you call a hiding hole where they could hide the fact that they're actually doing human trafficking, ETC, and all persons called Negro, Black, Colored, Indians, ETC, or all 14th Amendment are listed under the 14th Amendment in the corporate state of Delaware records, ETC. And so it's important for people to know that subtlety of political activity, to understand the necessity of them having a consciousness of what national is and what nationalization is, and the intellectual and informational concepts and philosophies that must be taught back to the people to reconnect them with the civilized world and to correct their legal status or standing in society, ETC, so that they could be by law inheritable. And so it's important for people to understand that the functional purpose of the establishment of the 14th Amendment corpse or corporate person was to create a situation from a legal perspective, whereas our people would lose all standing at law and will be listed as stateless persons, because without a nationality, or without nationality being known and recognized, ETC, one is not in the purview of what is known as the rights of the national, or rights of, or what you call the rights, international law rights protecting the human population of the nations of the world. And so without a nationality or being recognized, we would be listed as stateless persons, which would be by default causing all inheritances to be retained or cribbed, or what you say confiscated by the corporate states, ETC, and therefore it would perpetuate servitude and slavery from one generation to the next, in so much that we would not be able to accumulate what you would call old money, or old, or what you call old solidified or stabilized estates. And this is what's been operative in North America under the artificiality of the 14th Amendment, and why that is promoted amongst the Moors, who have been branded Negroes, Blacks, and Colored, with their Negro marching leaders convincing them under civil rights fraud that they were citizens under the 14th Amendment, not knowing that they were corpse citizens, dead citizens under corporations, and not actually under any sanguineous principle, and are in fact were outside of civilized society or outside of civilized government, and in fact were listed as stateless persons. And so that allowed the colonizing Europeans, who themselves are impostoring and pretending to be Americans, to actually steal the people's birthright and actually live off of them economically, socially, and politically, including using them as three-fifths persons to vote in their compromised political parties without the people actually getting benefit of that vote. And thus the three-fifths person principle, due to the fact that they're absent of name and nationality, and also not having the availability of the international community coming to the aid of such persons, being they don't interfere into the sovereign affairs of any other said government. And you can look at that in relationship to the Monroe Doctrine. And when you do the research, you'll find that the inspiration of the Monroe Doctrine is based in the activities of the Treaty of Verona, which inspired the Monroe Doctrine. And so it's important for our people to know history in order to understand the connection with all this stuff. And a lot of things that they've been marching and praying for, calling racism, is the activities of the secret Treaty of Verona designed to destroy them and to destroy our families, including the Christian Black Codes, which was adopted in all the states in 1868. So that's the Christian Black Codes of 1724. And so this is what's been destroying our people, and they need to stop talking about racism, which is the species, and start getting to the culprit of what's really happening to them, so that they can themselves be self-inspired to correct their status and understand the reason why Noble Drew Ali set up the Moorish Dibani National Movement, and for them to come into their own and honor their mothers and fathers and give back the Christianity and the church back to the Romans, and turn back to the principles of ancient mothers and fathers to correct their status, and therefore be descendable and able to regain or reclaim their lost estate. So we're talking about legal status. So the nature of nationalization is not only the proclamation of it on what you would call the international informational stage of publication. It is also the nuances of them understanding all of the nuanced implications of the lack of nationality that affects persons who are not having or not presently acknowledging their nationality, that would be listed as stateless persons. And so I suggest that all the listeners list the word stateless person and go look at the implications of it, and then they'll understand why Noble Drew Ali said in his divine warning by the prophet for the nations that the 14th and 15th Amendment is not necessary for the salvation of my people and citizens, because it has a legal and lawful implication to both their welfare, all estates, and all inheritances, etc.
And back to what you were saying about the 3/5, so that's in connection with what the 3/5 compromise?
The 3/5 person is persons without name or nationality.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at the 5 points of man, you're looking at man in the circle of the zodiac, and so you see arm, leg, arm, leg, head.
Mm-hmm.
And so arm, leg, arm, head is Allah forward and Allah backwards, whether forward in the circle or backward in the circle. And by the divine construction of the human body, the constitution, which is muscles and tissues, which is referred as Muslim or Muslim, created by the womb of woman, without the name or nationality, the corporate state now becomes the mother. And this is where you get the term parentis in law, where the state claims to be the mother, and therefore cribs, and this is how they steal the people.
So, okay. I'm glad that you explained that. So, because some will think that the 3/5 is saying that they're half human and that they are not full man. But this is in regards to that.
They're outside of the human family. That's why Drew Ali says what Negro, black, and colored has never been a part of the human family. That's why they use the brand system. Because as soon as they get their Negro leaders to get the people to agree to be Negro, black, and colored by their own oral contract, they're outside of the human family, therefore not descendable.
Descendable, let me make sure I'm clear, too.
There's no such nation There's no such nations attached to the human family. There's no such record as no Negro nation, no colored nation, and no black nation doesn't exist. And as soon as the people agree to be that, they've given up their birthright. And we're talking law now, not just historical. We're not just talking historical malfeasance. We're talking fundamental law. Because one must be in one's own proper person to make a claim of right anywhere on the planet.
So, Taj, what you're saying, are there situations where people may, like if they nationalize and if they publish and circulate proclamations, is it so that in certain cases, if all the bases aren't covered, they're still considered to be 14th Amendment citizens, even though they may have published their proclamation?
Yeah. Well, the problem that you have is that Europeans know that they cannot traffic with persons that are of a nation. This is why they insist on trying to tie people to that straw estate that they've created with the all capital letters. That creates a 14th Amendment entity that they can assign themselves as hofer or trustee over all your estate by virtue of the corporate state having escheated all of your resources in the first instance. And this is where you get the resistance coming from the corporate state persons and agencies, because they know that they've been doing human trafficking. And as soon as you make public proclamation by the rule of law of any estate, anyone who is a trustee or a fofer must remove themselves from the executor position, because the heir or the one with the birthright becomes automatically the competent creditor and executor. And this is another reason why they don't teach our people trust law. You get the point?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that right there might have to be for a separate class, because I know it will make the the announcements on that and moving forward within the week to come. But I see what you're saying.
Nationality is broad, because it's not just the correcting of the record from a factual, grammatical, and political perspective. There's also a body of knowledge and philosophy that must go with it, because the people must be made competent. That's why Drew Ali said to the Moors, he said, the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you'd go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yes. And we have actually several more people that came in on the line. Let's see here. Caller 720-496. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from. Any question or comment?
Islam. This is Eric Charles McCaleb Bay out of Denver Territory.
What's up, brother? How you doing?
Islam. I'm doing all right. Really, I'm going with the flow, and I really just wanted to listen, but I wanted to personally thank Taj for doing what you've been doing. Because one thing I've been, studying for a while, I've been watching and listening, but what has dawned on me is that you made a choice. And that alone is inspiring me. So I just want to give you your props, and I'm going to sit back and listen. Thanks.
Right on, good brother. Islam and peace. Trust we do some good.
Islam.
All right. Peace, brother.
Islam.
Caller 562-533. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name where you're calling from, or your question or comment.
Hotel. This is Ariel calling from California.
Islam Hotel.
What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I've been following you for a while, Taj. I'm actually out here with Sabir in Cali, learning underneath him, and he's introduced me to a lot of your work. So I just want to say I appreciate your contribution to the movement. But what I want to ask you, and maybe you can expand on this statement, is with this whole Trayvon Martin thing, it's not that I'm not passionate or feel for the family that they're going through what they're going through, but my people, I can't get with the reaction. You know, we tend to react. And so I want to know, from your perspective, Brother Taj, what is it that we need to go about this in a more strategic way, and why is it that we can't put that mindset on?
Again, and this is back to our people must be taught the principles of nationality and remedy with the international community, because as Negro, Black, and colored, essentially they're Christian property and have limited to no standing at law. We're talking about the legal status issue. And, of course, Drew Ali brought this information to us 100 years ago, and the people are still debating, but that has more to do with the sellout grand governors amongst our people than anyone else who were given this information and the responsibility to take it to the hedges and the highways. However, the prophet said, I come for the young and the yet unborn, the old can go if they want to. And so, therefore, it is the duty of all loyal and faithful Moors to take this information to the hedges and the highways and to the four corners of the earth, to all nations, and make sure it gets to the people, and to produce literature in order to change the people. And anyone who has degrees and have not produced literature have no business carrying them degrees or those titles. And I suggest to yourself, as with all of us, if we dispense this information to our people so that they can understand status and its relationship to a state and the fundamental principles and the recognition by the civilized community in relation to the people of North America to declare their nationality, which is within the rights of indigenous people that President Obama signed, I think much of this stuff can be remedied relative to these activities that are taking place, because the family and others would be charging them with genocide activities in the World Court, etc., and they would not be able to easily get away with what they're doing under their Christian black codes, with the rest of the civilized world not answering up to these issues or calling them to the floor on these issues. Islam.
Ashe. Thank you, brother.
All right. Well, have a good night. Brother, 314-4828. Welcome to Silver Alert. Please state your name, where you're calling from.
Islam. It's Racism Bey again. I was still online.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that.
And how you doing, Queen Santasha? I'm sorry for not even speaking to you the first time.
All right, no problem. I know that you spoke in your inner eye. All right.
But yeah, I listen to your show all the time, even when, just in general. So, I don't have a chance to often speak to, you or the Brother Taj. So, I got a few more questions. If I was, I just got a question about, I understand.
All right, let's see here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Brother, you there?
Islam?
Oh,
yes.
Okay. All right, continue.
Yes.
So, there's two questions.
Yes. Referring to endorsements of negotiable instruments, understanding that.
Brother, you there?
You're breaking up. We're not hearing you. Your contact is bad.
Okay, let's see here. We've got a caller 803-235. Welcome to Silver Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from. Caller 803. Taj, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah, maybe they were on mute.
You got to remember, too, Santasha, a lot of times when we start getting into pertinent issues, they do a lot of interferences.
Oh, yes. I noticed that that happened heavily when we did the show on the nationality card with when Abdullah came on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, so
none of it
applies to me. Yes. And so I see here on Article 4 for the secret treaty, where it goes into talking about the situation with Spain and Portugal uniting happily.
Yes.
Till we, unhappily.
Now we look at Spain and Portugal, then you understand. Now you're looking at things that led up to the Battle of Granada. You see, the 1492 battle. See, you can see the foundation leading up to that. You see the point? So the situation of Spain and Portugal unite unhappily all the circumstances to which the treaty has particular reference. So they're even telling you that the treaty, what the treaty is reference to, you see? So the high contracting parties invite to France the care and putting an end to them, encouraged to assist her in the manner which may the least compromit them in their own people and their people and the people of France by means of a subsidy on the part of the two empires, 20 million of francs every year from the date of the signature of this treaty to the end of the war. Now, Article 5, in order to establish in the peninsula the order of things which existed before the revolution of Cadiz, and see, Cadiz is a Moorish city, you see, and to ensure the entire execution of the articles of the present treaty, the high contracting parties give to each of the other the reciprocal assurance that as long as their views are not fulfilled, rejecting all other ideas of utility or other measure to be taken, they will address themselves with the shortest possible delay to all the authorities existing in their states and all their agents in foreign countries with the view to establish connections tending toward the accomplishment of the objectives proposed by this treaty. And so now you understand Cadiz, and you also understand Spain. Now you understand why Michelle went to Alhambra, the last stronghold of the Moors, when President Obama went to Hiccuta, what you call Egypt, and revealed to the world that the United States Constitution is derived from Muslim law. Then they came back, and he immediately signed the rights of indigenous people. You start seeing the relationship.
I see it now. I see it. That's how,
but people who don't know law and history people who don't know law and history would not recognize the signals, which were so blatant. And then you'll also notice that there was a picture taken with Michelle Obama and President Obama coming through the double doors with the guard standing to the left with the Moorish flag.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Now you see the correlations?
Mm-hmm.
But yet you don't see the Negro leaders emphasizing that to the people, do you?
No, not at all.
Why? Because they're compromised. You see the whole point? But yet the signals are all there. You see the point?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's read Article 6. This treaty shall be renewed with such changes as new circumstances may give occasion for, either at a new Congress or at the court of one of the contracting parties, as soon as the war with Spain shall be terminated. Number 7, the present treaty shall be ratified with the ratifications exchanged at Paris within the space of 6 months, made at Verona the 22nd day of 1822. So as you can see, they've been operating off an agenda while we're sitting around being trained by marching preachers to sit around and talk about racism, which is a diversion. You see the point?
Oh, I see it. This is very clear. So this pretty much, so originally, I see here that it was a treaty between, Austria, France, Prussia, and Russia.
You got that right. And then when you tie this together with 1884, you see the meeting of all the Christian nations in Berlin, and they had the Berlin Conference, and they were dividing up the Moorish Empire.
Yeah.
And this is why you hear the term French Morocco, British Morocco, Spanish Morocco.
Yes. Because we're
there you go.
Prussia, part of the Moroccan Empire, and part of Russia.
Now you go. Now you got it. And so when you see when people are talking about African history, if they don't know world history, they're incompetent, aren't they?
Right. I see. So this
now you
was
see why
rambling to Africa. Okay.
Now you understand when they're promoting Afrocentricity, they usually have people sitting around with drums and dashikis on and limiting people's concepts to a narrow view when it should be broad. That's called misdirection. You see the point?
Oh, yeah.
Then you can understand the mental disassociation.
I see that clear.
And the Europeans living off their estate, and they don't even know it because they're mentally disconnected from their own land. You see how that works? Therefore, recognize the work that we have to do.
And then that's what leads to this justified genocide.
There you go. And then you'll find that right in the King Alfred plan. And this is why, like in the King Alfred, where they reveal that these people are bound to this continent by heritage. And you notice that all the marching Negro leader guys always avoid that part of the King Alfred plan when they're talking about it. They'll talk about racism, but they conveniently avoid that section. That's because they're compromised. Why? Because it ties the people clearly back to the continent, not just to the country, to the entire continent.
And that right there, Taj, and thinking about the boundary markers on the gerrymandering and everything that exists on the man-made maps, when looking at these issues, I know you always say that when dealing with nationalities, it's beyond just the name change or the name correction and then the publication, and that there's a whole bunch of the subtleties that needs to be addressed.
That's exactly correct.
And on that note, what are you finding to be like some of the common things that people are unclear about, like when you're giving your classes and your travels and everything?
Geography, the basics of geography, and of course not knowing the fundamentals, 8 parts of speech, or the matrix of speech, which is referred to the etymon, or the egg seed, which is the etymon, which is the mother of the word, or knowing how to trace words and putting them in the context when certain writs or constructs were made, so they will have a proper comprehension of what the writers meant when things were written. And at the same time, knowing when scholars are sometimes, or alleged scholars are sometimes taking sociologically constructed words like black and Negro and stuff, and then putting them retroactive in history when they were not applied, and therefore trying to solidify or establish social concepts that exist today that did not exist at past times, and they tried to make it a seem that it did exist at past times, just like they try to make the word slave appear to be anciently used, and it's actually a contemporary term dealing with Slovakians, and therefore when it's put retroactive in history, it creates false concepts. Well, this is what is commonly done, and I see that those areas are the areas that we need to fix, including the fact that the people think that the 14th Amendment was properly ratified, and that some Europeans can sit around with some field marshals and make people citizens who are not themselves at the table constructing the instrument. You can't just make some contract and make somebody a citizen of some corporate nation state when they themselves are not in the negotiations of it or constructing the instruments, etc. Not only creating a citizenship, but absolutely a legacy citizenship of corpse or dead corpse citizenship, making them think they had living law. All these types of things are these subtleties that we need to fix with our people, including the fact that most of them, even being adults and having degrees from different colleges and stuff, are not familiar with the fundamental 8 parts of speech, and therefore are usually subjected to connotative linguistics, which was introduced to cause a lot of this mystery system, including the fact that they don't know the fundamental facts of certain words that are commonly used within our communities have legal implications or what you call true meanings that are contrary to the connotative meanings that they've accepted. And so they commonly interject the connotative meanings within their language, which also creates what you call subtle contracts or verbal social contracts that they're not even aware of because they're not aware of the language. But it's easy to fix that, but it's not taught to them by their so-called teachers and their so-called marching, praying leader guys who usually know the principles of etymology themselves but do not teach it to their followers because it would free them mainly from them. ETC, I see that as elementary. The other part, I see that that many of the adults don't know what money is, but they're always talking money issues. They don't know what fiat is, but they always they think that fiat is money. They don't know what currency is, but they think that currency is money. And so when you look at the multiplicity of problems, including the fact that most of them have not studied the Constitution or its origin, nor the treaty that supersedes the Constitution, etc., therefore not even knowing the obligations of public servants in their interfacings with them while being interfaced with these people, usually to a negative injury on their own part. Those things, for the most part, is what I see.
Now, with that, and even though I know you had mentioned it on a couple of other shows, but for people that may be tuning in for the first time, can we talk a bit about how the Black Slave Codes got instituted in 1868 within the states, and then also to look at exactly what the preamble is saying in the Constitution and talk about the parties that are listed in the preamble?
Yes. So when you're looking at the preamble for the Constitution, you're looking at we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, for our posterity, etc., to establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And so what you're essentially talking about is two different entities. You're talking about a sovereign entity, or what you would call the true sovereign, that's distinguished from the corporate or the secondary or subordinate institution or entity, which would be the United States of America. And you will look at that as simply the true people of the land sanctioning the operations of the Europeans on our land, and that's how that should be viewed. On the other, additionally to that, the Christian Black Codes are the code system that come directly from the church for governing the Asiatics of North America, and the Christian Black Codes of 1724 are essentially the codes that was adopted from Codes Noirs from the Franciscan Brotherhood, and that was after they closed after they did the great discussion that they had on controlling the Asiatics and creating divisional systems or mental divisional systems for controlling the people in 1712 along the James River. And you'll see there's reiterations of those philosophies in that area, of course, with the first aristocracy that they set up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you'll convoluted writings about what they call the Lynch doctrine, or the Willie Lynch letter, which is a modern dissertation of their psychological warfare setup at that time. And you'll see that the Christian Black Codes that are currently used was adopted in 1724. And again, that came from the Codes Noirs of the Franciscan Brotherhood, and it has essentially about 54 articles to it, etc. And with the first article of the Christian Black Codes, it decrees the expulsion of the Jews from the colony. And of course, you understand the so-called Jews is really these Asiatic Moors, and that's why Noble Drawley says to the Moors, he says we're really Jews, we're also Jews, so we don't use that name because the European is using it, but we're actually Yahudi too, so when you look at the Inquisition operations of the Christians against the Muslims and the Jews, you understand that both of them is in reference to the Moors. And so the Christian Black Codes have been used since 1724 to destroy our families, and those codes came directly from the church, etc. And it is well known and documented However, many of your so-called black leaders, because most of them claim to be Christian ministers and they getting paid at the expense of their own people, will not tell the truth about the church and about the fact that the black codes, which are used to destroy our families, came directly from the church, which is further proof of their compromise, and, of course, which ties them, again, to their oath to the Popes of Rome via the secret Treaty of Verona, Article 3.
This is something. So, like, with this is connected to, like, with the people lacking the knowledge and paying attention to this, because I know that a lot of people, they're asking, just like how the brother called earlier, and there's been other people, they want to know, like, what should the people be doing when these things happen. At the end of the day, if the concepts are not clear in regards to the truth about the history, the nationality principles, the whole real deal about what the spirituality is, then they wouldn't be able to put the whole picture together to try to invoke, like, some change to make sure that things work out for their favor and to protect their people.
That's right. That's right. You know, and without a knowledge of history, most of their energy is spent on things that are really not primal to what needs to be done to cure. You see the point?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, in other words, like, if you're driving, or if you're in a car and the car stops by the side of the road and it won't start, and everybody's out there discussing the tires, and the tires aren't flat, they're discussing the tires because they don't understand anything about the engine. And you can look at this principle as the same way. Our people are preoccupied talking about things that are of no worth or not at the root of the problem because they don't have a knowledge of what the problem is. And so they have a bunch of leader guys whose design is to keep them busy hollering and dealing with emotional arguments which feel good but don't fix anything. And that's what the race game is all about. When they're really suffering from the Christian black foods that's really being used by the corporate states to destroy their families. And these policies are enforced by all the municipalities, and they are known by all of the municipalities. In fact, they're a guidebook used by them.
And we have about 10 minutes left. Some time ago, you have made mention of the constitutional psychopathic inferiority. And when you said that, you said just go and look it up. And I did not expect to find that term in the California State Journal of Medicine. So for all who may not be familiar, Taj, please explain what that is and why was it in this the medical journals.
Yes, it actually deals with people who fundamentally are unaware of or do not conform to the fundamental, because when you're dealing with fundamental constitutional principles, you're actually dealing with divine principles based in nature's law, which deals with the human moral principle of self-governance, absence of lechery, thievery, and deceit, etc. Now, those constitutions that govern people are based essentially in what you call divine law. This is why you see, like, in the Declaration of Independence, where it says nature is God and nature's law. So you must understand the origin of the philosophies, not just those words, but one has to have a knowledge of the philosophies behind those statements in order to understand constitutional law. And so persons who are so contrary to the fundamental principles of moral government in society are called psychopathic constitutional inferiority. You know, and that is a person who is not in conformity with the very basic principles of common law, which is in nature inferred or conferred upon humans. And persons who are called Negro, Black, and Colored are listed under that due to the fact that they dishonor their mothers and fathers, and they insist on going around doing business in names that they know are not their own while demanding the rights of humanity, while they themselves are violating the principles of humanity, being in dishonor. Not only that, being the direct descendants of the founders of civilization while rejecting the principles of civilization which are founded in constitutions. And that's just as a snippet although you can expand on that, I think that's enough to give people a general understanding of that status.
Wow. So pretty much they would have that in here as saying that it's like a medical, like a social mental illness.
Yeah, that's what they. Why do you think they refer to so-called black people with the so-called bell curve thing that they wrote about years ago, meaning that they're not above the stage of animals and should be treated accordingly. And so it's impertinent upon those who know to teach those principles back to our people that they will be useful members of society, and not thinking that alleged black culture is actually representative of civilization, when in fact it is the opposite.
Wow. Well, this was an eye-opener, Taj. I tell you, for everybody, again, as I mentioned, be sure to do a download of this and spread it, post it, because I know that there's a lot of commentary, blogging, and everything going on. You could repost the links because the information does need to spread out so that the people can start digging, because these are some good keys that will lead them to other information for awakening.
Yeah, and the proper term would be constitutional psychopathic inferiority, and basically refers to individuals who show a lifelong and constitutional tendency not to conform to the customs of the group, and who habitually misbelieve and have no sense of responsibility to their fellow man or to society as a whole.
And then looking
this is why when people come from other nation states, you get the concept that is often projected where they say they don't like black people.
Right.
But our people think that they're talking about themselves in their blood. No, they're talking about them in the dead status.
Yeah. Because, this even sometimes some of our people from the Caribbean or South America, they are sticklers for that. And they're like, I'm not black. And they'll say it
they're not given their birthright just because we gave ours up. And so it continues within the law that these individuals, such persons held in that status, these individuals fail to learn by experience and are inadequate, incompatible, and inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
That's the basis upon which the rejection is made, you see.
I see.
And then our people think it's color, you see.
I do.
Now you see why Raleigh says, help me in my mission to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution of the United States of America. You see the point?
And on that point, when you said, where you said enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America, one thing that is so common. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because it's a compact. That's what kept the Europeans in check. You see the point? Because they're doing business at Morocco. It's not their constitution. That's why it says in Article 6, it says all debts and agreements entered into before the adoption of this constitution shall be binding against the United States. You see the point? This is why you see them marching black leaders and stuff, trying to make our people think it has no connection to us.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Because for the most part, most people reject the Constitution because they said that is something that albino Europeans came up with, and it has nothing to do with them.
This is what they'll say. White people, they don't know that white people's a status. That's what the problem is. Right. Because they are buried in the black culture of connotative linguistics, thinks white people means Europeans. You see the point? They don't know that free white persons is Moors and other people who are in their proper person. This is why we've got to teach our people law, because their concepts are wrong. And they're being misled by their fake scholars.
Mhm.
Some of them mean well, but they need to study. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
They don't know that they're white people because they see the whole. That's why they call constitutional psychopathic inferiority. You see the problem?
Right.
So you can show them right in the law book that they're white people. You see the point?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that the European ain't white. It doesn't mean Caucasian race. And they'll sit and debate with you. See the problem?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Besides, what I think too is that when it comes to like when people hear stories about the Dalits, what they would call the untouchables, and when they hear about apartheid and they know that segregation existed, but for the most part, a lot of people take the whole concept of a caste or a class system heavily
That's
existing.
what they need to know. They need to know the caste system's origins of these codes, and that they're not identities, they're caste systems. And if they don't understand that, then you can get it out of their head thinking that black is Afrocentricity.
Right.
They need to understand it's a caste. And once they understand that, they can understand the law better.
Right. Exactly.
And the problem that we have with the Negro leaders, they make them think it's an identity of Afrocentricity. That's the problem, which ties them to the codes. You see the point?
I see.
And then when the codes are enforced, then they're mad at everybody.
So
they agree to be
that,
black. That's those waiting for them.
And Todd, this is like a sidebar question, but it's still connected. In dealing with the laws of correspondence,
as above, so
when
below.
are people
Also represented by the symbol hex alpha.
Yes. And then in speaking to where go ahead.
And therefore, the implication that it's a spiritual fight made manifest there's a spiritual fight made manifest in the physical, and therefore divine and national movement. You see the point?
Yes, I do.
So that means we must have that balance, mustn't we?
Yes.
And so without the metaphysical philosophies, the people have a tendency not to really understand the aggregate civil constitution, nor the civic activities that take place every day. This what makes our people incompetent. You see the point?
Yes. And on that note, like with adhering to that principle, what is your take upon what people may be taking part of, like in private, but then in public, when the very things that they've been condoning and co-signing on manifest in a society where people are hurt and even certain things may happen to them or people around them, that it's like an uproar? Do you see it as if, like, maybe, because of course we know that, what's going on with the evil that exists within public servants and even the descendants of some of the Inquisitionists, the traitor Moors and people of that nature. We know that that exists. But do you think that, too, it's like that law of correspondence is kicking in terms of how some people may say that they're about, race pride. They have what they would call race pride, or they're for the people, but then behind closed doors or wherever, it's like, okay, black this, black this, black this, and even this is for some of our nationalized people that are nationalized, that would come out as being like conscious Moors, but then on the flip side, they're pretty much into like the black talk. They even may be around people a lot that may partake in like alcohol and things of that nature, even though it says not to do so in the Zodiac Constitution. Or a situation where
it's very simple. It's called hypocrisy.
Yeah.
For one, and number two, some people front, for the public, but have also other agendas. And you got to remember, a lot of people actually work for the Europeans, but they come amongst Moors to front in order to make them appear that they're in support, but really they're gathering information and report back to the Europeans. And then usually at one time or another in the future start some kind of confusion to destabilize the activities of the group. That's called helper operatives.
Mm-hmm. But like, so
but being aware of that, it is up to us in general to be diligent, and this is why I said to you before, no matter what, don't get caught up in personality. Stay tied to the cause and the mission.
Right. And so, with that too in mind, do you see like a parallel with how people have condoned the violent media and have actually induced that and taken that as a form of entertainment, especially even like with the music and stuff? They're pretty much remaining like silent and being in acquiescence, just letting that go on, as if it's just a little form of art, to actually have an impact metaphysically and actually in the physical form on things that are going on in society.
Oh yes, and this is back to really the spirit of the people, but you want to look at it also. This being the Aquarian age, all of whoever is whatever they are is going to be manifest in this age, and it cannot be hidden. Those who are compromised, they will, appear to get a reward for the time being, and some of them sacrifice for the temporary reward, but in this age and time, they'll all be exposed, etc. At the same time, you can look at even some of the Europeans now that because remember, they've had access to this information all the while, and they've benefited from the injuries to our people. But now that they recognize the middle class is being dissolved, you see them suddenly want the republic back. And so this is where you get among Europeans a lot of these so-called sovereignty groups, and this is where you see the fake government always trying to tie the Moors and the sovereignty group together because of the appearance of the agenda. But keep in mind, there are two different statuses. So you got Europeans battling against corrupt Europeans for resources that don't belong to neither one of them, if you get the whole point. Now, just because they're sanctioned under treaty to do business here don't mean this is their stuff. And so what you see them trying to do is be sovereign where they can't be sovereign, but they're talking some truths about sovereignty, trying to preserve the middle class that they recognize as being dissolved and thrown underneath the bus. And so they're exposing some information, but not all of it. And this is also whatever they do expose, Moors must take it with a grain of salt, put it in its proper perspective, and make sure whenever they regurgitate anything that's exposed with the secrets that are revealed, that they must remember that they are the direct heirs. However, at the same time, recognized as it has been, they have overseers amongst them. And so those are where you get the compromised ones amongst ourselves that practice that hypocrisy that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And before we close out, for people that may be tuning in for the very first time, and all of this, what is being discussed is very fresh and new, what do you recommend for like the first two themes that they should really start studying to get some more insight on?
They should study the Constitution for the United States of North America, Treaty of Peace and Friendship. They should study the Nicene Council of 325. They should study the Secret Treaty of Verona. They should study the Christian Black Codes, the Negro Act, the Buck Act, etc. Christian Black Codes of 1724. Those things for starters. They should do a little bit of basic study on the epimon and etymology, basic study. The parts of speech, 8 parts of speech. That should keep them busy for 2 minutes anyway.
Got it. Well, Taj, I want to thank you so much for being on. Like always, I appreciate you. and taking your time, because I know it's a lot going on.
All right. Sister, love to everybody. Love to you. Let's get the work going and keep it going. Islam and peace.
Right. All right. Islam, peace and love. All right, everyone. This concludes another episode of Silver Alert Rising. And you know, like always, the goal is to be informative, engaging, and third eye opening. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll be connecting with you on Tuesday. Peace and love, and have a good night, y'all.
And now, insurance-minded speeches from Geico.
Hardship. My grandmother would go through it every month to pay her insurance bill. First, she would handwrite a paper check, in cursive. Then, using her own tongue, she would wet a stamp for an envelope. Today, however, we need not weary our hands and tongues. Today, we can pay our Geico bill with the Geico app. Away with hardship, in with bill pay on the Geico app. Thank you.